Hello, and welcome to this brief clip in which we will give an overview of your role as scientific chair of an FWO projects panel. In this video, we give an overview of the tasks you have as chair of one of our expert panels. These tasks include advising FWO on panel composition, distributing the applications to the appropriate panel members, reviewing proposals, chairing the panel meeting, following up on feedback, and finally, assessing the reports on ongoing and recently completed projects. First, we'll cover your duties in the panel composition. As a member of the Domain Council, your task in the composition of the panel is to help FWO in the selection of new panel members. First, FWO identifies the open places in the panel, which are created by panel members reaching the end of their term, leaving the panel, or having a conflict of interest that prevents them from serving in the panel in this call. Second, FWO asks you to select suitable new experts for the open places in the panel. Ideally and most frequently, experts are selected from the FWO Review College. This is a set of experts who have applied for panel membership and are therefore interested in serving and who have made it through FWO's rigorous screening process. We will send you a list of the members of the Review College for your panel, including an overview of the expertise of each member of the college in relation to the expertise needed in the panel. You will also have access to their CVs. This should allow you to make an appropriate selection. Several rules apply to the selection of new panel members and the panel composition. The most important consideration is the appropriate distribution of expertise in the panel. It is crucial that the panel covers the expertise areas that it is supposed to cover. This is listed in the so-called expertise matrix. The first consideration in selecting a new member for the panel is always to think about how they would contribute to the expertise already present in the panel and which gaps they might fill. Secondly, we aim to have international panels, so the majority of panel members should not be affiliated to a research institution in Flanders. In practice, this usually means that at most 5 out of 12 panel members may have Flemish affiliation. In recent years, we have generally seen the number of Flemish members in the panels go down. To be clear, FWO does support the selection of Flemish members and finds it valuable that experts with knowledge about the local research landscape are part of the panel. Another consideration in selecting new panel members is the gender balance in the panel. In line with international trends, we aim to have at least 1/3 of the members from the underrepresented gender. Typically, this will mean that in a panel of 12 members, we should have at least 4 women. Institutional diversification is also important, which is why we aim to not have more than 2 members from the same institution in the panel. This applies to Flemish as well as international institutions. Finally, an expert can serve only in one expert panel at the same time, so you have to make sure the expert you select is not also selected for another panel. The FWO staff will help keep track of this. FWO also asks you to take sustainability into account in selecting new experts, but only if it is not to the detriment of the panel. As you can see on this slide, we have formulated a guideline in this regard that requires that you give preference to a European expert, that is to someone located relatively closely to Brussels, if and when you have to make the choice between experts with a very similar profile but located in different locations. To be clear, this consideration does not take precedence over the importance of adding the appropriate expertise to the panel and achieving gender balance, but it should play a role if other important parameters of panel member selection are covered. The selection process begins with an email from the FWO informing you of the open places in the panel, the current panel composition, and an overview of the Review College. For both the members of your panel and the Review College, you will have information about their expertise as mapped onto the panel's expertise matrix. That is the set of topics that the panel must have expertise on. Here you see an example of what the Review College document looks like. At the top, you have the current composition of first the fellowship panel and below this the projects panel. This gives you information about the expertise currently present in the panel, as well as the gender and institutional balance. Lower in the document, below the yellow line, you see the members of the Review College. that is, the candidate panel members. For these experts, you also see their expertise mapped on the expertise matrix of the panel, as well as their gender and institutional information. Additionally, in column A of the document, you may see the codes of other panels or references to earlier appointments of these experts in FWO panels. This information is there for administrative follow-up. Experts may remain in our review college for 3 years. They are ordered on the basis of the year in which they applied. Typically, we would recommend that you first consider the experts who responded to the most recent call, as they have most recently expressed interest in serving in the panel. But you can always select people from earlier years as well, and should indeed do so if expertise, gender, sustainability, or other concerns prompt you to. We use color coding in the panel document to indicate to you experts who are no longer available for selection. In short, any expert whose name is colored is not available for selection because they have already been selected for another panel. Any expert whose name is still white may be selected for your panel. Considering all the relevant parameters, you then formulate an advice to FWO for the selection of new panel members. In doing so, please also consider the broader CV of an expert. For all candidates who applied in the most recent call, CVs are available on the FWO extranet. For experts who applied in earlier years, you may of course look up additional information online. Should an expert with the appropriate profile not be present in the review college, we can seek external candidates. While FWO prefers to work with members from the review college, appointing external members is possible, certainly if expertise or gender considerations require this. Your advice on the selection of new panel members is then presented to the full panel for feedback. Please note that the panel does not have access to the complete review college, but they may formulate advice on the profile of the sought-after expert. Once the panel has come to an agreement on whom to select for the open places, the new members are invited by the FWO. Panel composition typically starts in October and runs until May. The main panel should be complete by April, when the proposals for the project call are submitted to FWO. In the course of April and early May, we may still have to replace panel members who act as supervisors or co-supervisors of applications submitted to the panel. Your next important task will be to distribute the proposals across all panel members. As a first step in the evaluation procedure, FWO will request all panel members to check the list of submitted applications and to indicate potential conflicts of interest. Additionally, FWO will ask panel members to indicate how familiar they are with the topic of the proposed project. We provide you with these so-called levels of confidence in order to facilitate the distribution of the review duties across the panel members. When distributing the applications, we ask you to consider potential conflicts of interest, the indicated confidence rates, and to take care that the workload is distributed more or less evenly across the panel members. For each application in your panel, 2 panel members will write a regular review in parallel with 2 on-topic external reviewers. A third panel member, the so-called rapporteur, will write at a later stage a report that integrates these 4 reviews as well as the rebuttal. At the same time, the rapporteur will also suggest a score for the proposal, which will form the basis for the discussion with the panel and which will of course be subject to amendment during the panel meeting. The rapporteur will act as the spokesperson for the application in the panel and will also be responsible for the final feedback. As you, as scientific chair, will be requested to guide the panel discussion, we ask that you avoid being rapporteur unless circumstances require this. Combining your role as chair with the role of rapporteur may complicate your position during the panel discussion. We do, however, strongly encourage you to take up the role of internal evaluator for multiple proposals. The distribution of the applications will need to be completed in the second half of May. Given the strict timeline and time schedule of the evaluation procedure, please complete this task within 1 week of receiving the invitation to do so. Emails by the FWO administration will help you to keep track of the deadlines and of the allocation procedure. As scientific chair, you will also review some of the proposals in your panel. In order to get a fair distribution of the workload and to match applications to the member with the most on-topic expertise, scientific chairs usually review some applications themselves. We do advise that you perhaps distribute fewer applications to yourself so that you remain available to cover unexpected gaps in the panels when members are forced to drop out in the course of the review process due to unforeseen circumstances. Next, let's talk about your responsibility to chair the panel meetings. As scientific chair, you will guide the panel meeting. The panel meeting is held in Brussels. As chair, you must attend in person. In preparation of this meeting, the administrative chair will share a preliminary ranking, including and based on all the scores that were assigned. During a short preliminary meeting or via email, you will discuss this ranking and the scores of the applications, determining which applications certainly need to be discussed at the panel meeting because of, for example, their position in the ranking, divergence in scores, or other reasons. Issues regarding out-of-scope proposals, potential conflicts of interest in the panel, or double funding should be discussed as well between the chairs in advance of the panel meeting. The preliminary ranking and instructions on how to prepare for the panel meeting will be sent to all panel members prior to the meeting. During the panel meeting itself, you will guide the discussion. Depending on what you agreed on with the administrative chair, you may choose to briefly touch upon the highest and lowest ranked projects in order to proceed almost immediately to the proposals with deviating scores between the reviewers or applications near the cutoff zone of the ranking. For each project, you should work towards reaching a consensus score that is in accordance with the score grid for each criterion. At the end of the meeting, you will need to have selected the applications which will receive funding from the panel. During the panel meeting, you are assisted by the administrative chair and the account administrator. The administrative chair will make sure that everything proceeds according to FWO's regulations and that the score grid is applied correctly. The score grid needs to be applied correctly in accordance with the appropriate guidelines. We therefore ask you to familiarize yourself with the score grid well ahead of the meeting, to apply it yourself at all times, and to monitor that other panel members apply it as well. All decisions are taken in consensus by the panel. Therefore, make sure to involve the entire panel in all important decisions such as scoring and the final ranking. FWO's application forms include a section on parallel applications. Project proposals can be submitted to different calls, but the FWO evidently does not allow exactly the same research activities to be funded twice. Should any issues arise with a specific application, the administrative chair will bring this up during the preparatory meeting. The panel may subsequently be asked to assess the potential overlap between the parallel applications. After the panel meeting, we expect panel members to prepare the feedback for the applicants. After panel members have submitted the feedback, the FWO will screen this for typos, perhaps inappropriate language, etc. The administrative chair will also verify whether the feedback provides sufficient substantiation for the final funding decision. If this is not the case, the administrative chair may get in touch with you to obtain additional input for the feedback report. One of the roles of the panel is also to assess the progress of ongoing and recently completed projects. To assess whether FWO funding was used effectively, holders of an FWO project are asked to submit an interim or ex post report. These reports should include an overview of the research activities they have performed. As scientific chair, you will need to assess these reports. After reading the reports, we expect you to suggest a score for each report and to provide some comments for the beneficiaries if this is required. Your suggested scores and comments will then be shared with the panel members who can respond. This entire procedure will be performed online. The reports will not be discussed during the panel meeting. In the assessment of scientific reports, you can use one of two available scores: approved and insufficient. A score of approved is given to reports in which the initial goals which were put forward in the proposal have been reached. A score of insufficient can be given to reports which do not show sufficient proof that the intended intermediate or final goals have been met. Keep in mind that assigning a score of insufficient can have serious consequences for the beneficiary, and the decision to award such a score should not be taken lightly. Therefore, such a score needs to be thoroughly substantiated and may warrant discussion with the administrative chair. Depending on whether a score of insufficient was awarded to an interim or ex post report, the consequence is that funding may be stopped or that a new application by the beneficiary may be impacted negatively. The head of the university where the beneficiary is working will also be informed by the panel's decision to award a score of insufficient to the scientific report. As scientific chair, you will receive FWO's request to assess these reports in July. By the end of September, the assessment should be completed. This includes potential amendments of your initial score by the panel. Before we conclude this video, we want to remind you that all panel discussions, including discussions between the scientific and administrative chair, and all documents related to the panel are strictly confidential. Relevant information that can increase the transparency of decisions should be included in the feedback reports to the applicant and will be communicated at the end of the evaluation procedure by the FWO. Should you be approached by an applicant, please refer them to the FWO and refrain from any further communication with them. Please also inform FWO that you have been contacted by an applicant. This concludes this video on chairing an FWO expert panel on research projects. Should you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact your account administrator or administrative chair. For now, goodbye.